News headline stories. I'm Ayo Mairese.
And I'm Valentine Ohu. Good morning.
Joining us for analysis this morning, we have Adenike Oyetunde. Morning, Adenike.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Adenike.
I like your hair.
Yeah, it is actually nice.
I
So that's the
do.
first thing I told her this morning.
Thank you.
So Adenike Oyetunde is Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter. We also have with us Mr. C. Good morning, Mr. C.
Good morning, Aya. Good morning, Valentine. Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Dinika. Good morning, Lagos.
Good to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming. Mr. C is at Mr. C on Twitter, but it's a unique one. It's Mr. C with 5 E's. So please follow him on
It's
Twitter.
actually MIS. I never knew until you said it. So it's MISTA.
Oh,
I used to think it
MISTA.
was MR.
Me too.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you so much for clarifying that. So it's MISTAC 5E's. That's fantastic. All right. Okay. So let's go on to our stories for today. But before then, this is how you can get involved in the conversation or getting on the conversation. So the number on WhatsApp is 0809 On Twitter,
We're at Smooth 981 FM. The hashtag is freshly pressed 981. We're streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Our first story, we get straight into that. This first one is from Premium Times. Federal government to begin sale of new houses soon and nationwide. Mr. Fashola, that's Babatunde Fashola, the Minister of Works and Housing, was represented by Sarah Alawode, Controller General, or rather Controller Federal Ministry of Housing, at an event in Lagos. And she spoke about this and saying that they're going to go or start a program that would enable Nigerians to subscribe to get some of these properties, and it'll be done through an online process that will ensure it's transparent. Your thoughts on this story, Adenike?
Usually, when you hear stories of this nature, you're excited because there's a presupposition that there'll be transparency, there'll be fairness, and the pricing will be even across the board.
Mm.
And so, one of their aims is to, like you mentioned, start the process through an online platform and then also ensure that human interference, which is one of the problems that we have as a people, but we're failing to accept, and we continue to increase our civil service. Um, they're trying to reduce that to the barest minimum. It's good because housing is one of the biggest challenges that we have, and we know that quite a number of baby boomers
Mm.
became house owners or property owners because of initiatives like this. And for someone like me, who is in her 30s, there are many questions that what will be required for a person like me to qualify? Will the pricing be such that even if I cannot pay a lump sum, which we know when it comes to federal government housing or government housing, as the case may be, is usually stretched over a period of time. So people are anxiously waiting and seeing how this would improve and encourage more house owners. But
Mm.
we know that everyone cannot own a house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's a different conversation altogether.
Mm.
Fashola said that as we know that one of the greatest needs of a man is the need for economic shelter, and the other reason why housing is good is because it increases the economic potential of every man. Now, something very interesting that he said that they're also hoping that the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council would enhance the confidence of prospective land buyers in the whole system. And this is because a lot of people do not even know that in Lagos State, for instance, established in 2007, was the Lagos State Estate Agency Regulation Authority, whose one biggest job was to regulate and control the practice of real estate business in this particular state. It stated that, I remember one government, I'm not sure if it was Fashola or Ambody, came up and had this law against Omonile, as the case may be. So there are a lot of laws that exist, but because there's so many laws and nobody talks about them until it affects them, we do not know that these things exist. So one of the reasons why they highlighted this was because they wanted people to understand that the government's purpose is to regulate and professionalize the practice of real estate business, particularly agency practice in the state. But fingers crossed, time will tell. Like I said, transparency for me, fairness and pricing across boards. we need to know who qualifies and who will be exempt,
Yeah.
what the how it will be spread out,
Yes.
because there are many people in their 30s that barely even have money to survive, let alone own properties. How are
Exactly.
we encouraging? How, will it be a 30-year program? Will it be there are many mortgage in the abroad. We see people do mortgages for 50 years.
I tell
it's
you, and
even-
and that provides a high level of security for them and their
Absolutely.
families. Because right now it's scary to know that Nigeria has about 23 million housing deficits in the country. So, all right, we'll get there. Thank you, Adenika, for your analysis. Let's move on to the next story from the Punch newspaper. NIMC insists on 5,000 naira for ID card renewal.
Really?
We had this conversation last week. I am still fresh in your mind. Yeah?
Very fresh in my mind.
We had a conversation about what the National Identity Management Commission said. They insisted that the 5,000 naira be paid for renewal of national identity card. I remember we had this conversation. A lot of people were trying to understand the concept of that statement, whether it's for the national ID number or the card itself. But they're saying that the card has more embedded features than the passport and ATMs. Your thoughts on this, Mr. C?
CC. That's right.
Yes.
Okay. So what happened was the Director General of the NIMC, that's the National Identity Management Commission, was appearing before the House of Representatives Committee on Diaspora Affairs. This is how this issue of 5,000 naira came up. Now, reading the story, it is a bit sad that they either didn't ask him the proper questions or he didn't give the proper answers. The story jumps out that he says the card will cost 5,000 naira. He doesn't tell us why the card will cost 5,000.
Well, he did.
He just said it has more embedded features than the passport and the automated teller machine card.
Yes, he also clarified the difference between renewal, or rather, he said the difference between this card and the other cards. That a lot of the other cards, like the examples he gave for the passport and the other one, they are renewed, but this one is not renewable. It's once, like you just get it once and that's it. But then it still contradicts the statements.
Yeah. So Valentine,
further.
so what it is the statement is very vague. Embedded has more embedded features. What does that mean? But now, now I want to bring to the attention of our listeners that there's a card policy backing the national identity card. And paragraph 3.8 of the card policy says, for Nigerians, the card will last for 10 years.
Okay.
In all of this, since the NIMC came up with this renewal fee, they've never mentioned the duration period of the card. Never. It's never happened. Now, for foreigners, it will last for either 5 years or the duration of their residence permit, whichever one comes first. Now, the reason why the card will have to be renewed is it's not only an identity card, it will also function as an electronic payments card because it has an embedded chip. So you can use it for online payments, secure cash withdrawals, pure point-of-sale transactions. Now, he did not explain why. No, the committee asked why slips were being issued and where the cards are. He didn't address that question. He merely said that slips are used by FRIC and INEC. That in their language, the language or the terminologies they use, there's one card. Now, he hasn't said why the cards are not out, what is holding the cards.
But he said that last week. Sorry to interject, because last week he mentioned this same question came up, and he said it's a funding issue. So they cannot handle, they don't have funds to produce these cards themselves. The funds they have available to them is to conduct the registration exercise across the country.
Okay, so Valentine, now this, from what you said, if they have no funding, what is the whole point of starting this exercise?
Exactly.
Now, going beyond that, right? Government agencies and parastatals are now having their budget defenses. In the budget defense for what is the plan? And how are they going to integrate the various information out there?
Mr. C, you can have a budget allocated to your ministry or to your project, but the release of the funds is usually what the challenge is. And don't forget, we've talked about the budgets in the past and how they haven't been able to generate as much revenue as was projected when it was presented. So perhaps they're one of the casualties of that.
I have a question. I have a quick question. I don't have the card.
I don't
Have you registered?
And I haven't. And I will tell you one of the reasons. I feel like, just wait. when the change of name comes, I don't want that drama. I'm being honest. And I remember that someone was talking about for every entrance, you have to pay an
Change.
additional 500 naira or something
Yes.
of that sort. So I changed the address. I would check. I would have to. My last name is changing if I decide to continue with a new last name. All of these things will change. And did they talk about it here as well? Does it include?
So that was addressed at the time. They said, which was still last week, they
Yeah.
addressed that 500 naira one you said. They said that one is really affects if you erroneously put in a different date of birth and you want to now correct that error. It attracts for that single space, single column, attracts 500 naira.
Valentine.
Yes. Sir.
So just as Adenike had mentioned, it's a deterrent to you actually wanting to even register. So it's not encouraging.
Just to summarize this,
Yes, please.
we're not a serious country. No, that's what it is.
The
Because
next story
for a serious
blows
project
that.
like this, we cannot be talking about the non-release of funds.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Emma from Makoka says, great. So going back to the housing project, great initiative, but forgive my cynicism. Exactly are they selling to? Yes, we have a house deficit and the federal government is trying to solve it on square foot at a time, but transparency is key for me. We have seen how the cookie crumbles before. Now, moving on to this registration story, it's funny that the national identity card expires in 10 years. It's now about 4 years I did mine. The card is yet to be out, says Kola
Oh
Wole.
wow!
And then we have Samuel from, it's unfair that my national ID card and I received in 2018 after registering in 2015
I have
will
a
expire
question.
by 2020.
When does the term for
Sorry.
the card start to run? When I pick it up or once I register?
No, when it is issued.
So it's when
there's
it's
a date
issued
on
here,
it.
on
There's
it.
a date.
Each one
There's
has
a
a
Because that
production
person
date.
that said insurance
They
date
had
So
is
it
5
from-
years
he's
ago.
assuming. Because when you get issued a card, there's an
There's
issuance
another
date, there's an
issue.
expiration.
You don't even know the
expiry
insurances
date.
until you see it.
Yes.
And worse is that I had to pay, and who knows how much time before I get it. I have my bank ATM cards. I don't need the chip if that's why it has to expire.
See.
And then Yinka says on the Nigerian immigration service page, any correction costs 13 admin charge, which doesn't guarantee the changes being done. That's what is on their website. Imagine that. So going back to those comments.
All right. Thank you, Inka. Let's move on. Talk about it's just this story is interesting, I think. Nigerian Customs Service and the Masters Energy Commodities Trading Limited, I like how it's worded here, engaged in a war of words over containers of expired rice seized by the Nigerian Customs Service at the Tinkan Island port in Apapa, Lagos. The Nigerian Customs said this, they made the announcement. The boss, the Controller General of Customs, Hamid Ali, announced that a total of about, I think, how many?
33 containers
were seized.
Yes.
He made it seem like it was this is a recent capture. I mean, recent seizure in 2019. But the company itself is, these containers were seized in 2016. Why make it seem like it's something new? And they had other, intricate details in them. It's very interesting. Please take us through the
I
story.
personally want to just say well done to Premium Times, because what Premium Times did was to report from both sides.
Yes.
Listen to their representatives, and also give us their own stance as it concerns the data that was in contention. Like you mentioned, 2016, 2019, and Premium Times says that the checks showed that the custom indeed impounded 31 containers of rice belonging to the Masters Energy Commodities Trading Limited at the Tinkan Island ports imported from Thailand in August 2016. The containers were seized, and they were seized because the agent declared the contents to be yeast and not rice. That at the time, yeast importation attracted 5% duty, while rice had 110% duty and 60% levy. That Masters Energy Commodities put the blame on the clearing agent, who claimed the job was captured as another item because when they submitted the pre-arrival assessment report as the rice to the customs, it was rejected on the grounds of no proof of funds. And why it was necessary for me to mention that is because these are the issues that have been the bone of contention between customs and the Masters Energy Limited. Their representative actually did mention that, look, nothing was seized in 2019. In 2016, about 60 containers came in. And then before we knew, time elapsed, and then this federal government banning 41 list, and they couldn't get access to Forex, and then they told them, oh, how about you reach out to CBN, let's see what happens, back and forth. So there's a presupposition that within that time frame, the rice expired. But the customs boss is claiming that this rice was expired, this rice was seized in 2019, and back and forth. The other bone of contention is the declaration. And somebody claims that it was used, that was declared, that was being brought in. So the other person is claiming, no, we didn't. We gave our clearing agent. He's the one that understated what it was, and because of that, it was seized. And when they were trying to pay what is due the federal government, the customs boss said, you know what, just impound these containers. That's another bone of contention. And I also talked about the 41 items. Now, for me, and to me personally, I was telling Mr. C as we were sending and saying that it's very hard being a business person who has decided to be law-abiding in this country. And I'll give you an instance. A friend of mine imports cookwares, and the person's goods have been delayed for such a long time. And I remember reaching out to this person and saying, what exactly is the issue? Now, the claim is that because they had declared honestly what it was that they had they were importing into the country, it was taking longer because some other person who was also in the business, right, who had, I think, forcefully declared, had cleared, underpaid the federal government. Whose responsibility is it to cross-check these things when they're declared at the customs? How many people have forcefully declared? What have been the repercussion or consequences of forcefully declaring what it is that you've brought in? We know and we suspect that the customs actually has its officials who know these things, who collect money at the back. What is the federal government doing about this? I may not have or know one person per se, but I'm going to say that there's somewhere in my head, I feel like these are the things that we're being faced with.
So possibly down the line, down the line of people who were to receive these bribes, allegedly, somebody wasn't settled properly, and then now decided to blow the whistle.
I don't think that's even far-reaching if we assume that this is what happens. If even in the abroad, you know, there's a movie about Escobar and how one of his people were brought down, but the government deployed someone who was also working for Escobar, and they set them up, and then you find out that the government people are actually the one that enabled and allowed these people to do this for such a long time. So I feel like, except we want to be honest with ourselves, we know that these are the things we're eating ourselves up on the streets of Nigeria, as the case may be, and we'll continue to shortchange the government until the government itself wakes up to penalize everybody. Actions in actions and consequences is all I see in this rice. We did not import rice, you seize the rice, blah 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 blah. So.
And one other part that worried me is just not to extend this conversation, was the part where the Controller General alluded to the fact that the seizures were as a result of the partial border closure.
Oh yeah.
All right, so Dakpo Oluwa on Twitter says, Adenike, what is scary about this rice story is that Customs is lying publicly that it was in 2019 when all the records point to 2016. Why should we believe anything he says? Is this how they are running government?
Okay. Next story, which is a big elephant in the room. Presidential poll. Supreme Court affirms Buhari's election. The judgment was passed yesterday. Permit me, Mr. C, to just go through a very brief timeline to how this proceedings went. Proceedings of the Presidential Petition Tribunal that commenced on the 18th of March this year between the PDP and its candidate, of course, and the candidates with the APC. It was filed and just to challenge February 23 election. On May 8th, the tribunal commenced the inaugural sitting. It was chaired by the President of the Court, Justice Zainab Bukachawa. The tribunal was, however, delayed for another 3 weeks following the withdrawal of Bukachawa as chairman of the tribunal. June 10, 2019, pre-trial started and ended on the 3rd of July under chairmanship of Justice Mohammed Garba, who took over from Bukachawa. The main petition was then held in July 4th. Consequently, this was supposed to take 180 days as stipulated in Section 285 of the 4th Alteration of the 1999 Constitution, but took 177 days and ended yesterday. The thoughts of the proceedings, how it ended, and the reactions from both parties.
Okay, so the Supreme Court has delivered its judgment, even though it did not state the reason. It said that it will provide the reasons at a later date. Now, that having been said, the judgment doesn't come as a surprise. We long suspected that this is what was going to happen, and there are lessons we can take away from these proceedings. Now, first of all, the APC administration now has no further excuses. They should face squarely the task of government. And rescuing Nigeria from the dire straits in which it finds itself today. Now, the lessons we should take away from this: one, we need to be more deliberate. We need to be more interested in the process that throws off the candidates that appear on the election ballots. We cannot continue to pretend or suggest that politics is violent, therefore we leave it for a few Nigerians. We need to be more involved, because a test of every good society is the well-being of the citizens and whether they enjoy peace. Right now in Nigeria, it's hard or difficult to suggest that we're either enjoying a lot of peace or the society is doing very well. Now, we need to ensure that going forward, certain key provisions in the Electoral Act must be amended. The burden for establishing whether an election was conducted properly should not rest with the petitioner. It should rest with the body that conducted the elections. So going forward, it would be nice to see saddled with that responsibility. So where there's a dispute as to whether an election was conducted properly, INEC should just be made to come out and say, look, we either conducted it properly or not. Then one last point. Some of the issues that were being discussed in this appeal were religious. A candidate was alleged not to have the requisite educational qualifications. And then there was a dispute as to what his real identity was. If we had been more involved in the process that threw up these candidates, we would not be dealing with such mundane issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. C. Let's move on to our next story here from the Guardian newspaper. Banks, telcos, fintech urged to provide free USSD codes. That's the unstructured supplementary service data. So this is coming in from the Chief Executive Officer of Ecobank, Patrick Akinwunton, in a conference was talking about how the CBN is able to meet its 80% target if only they can employ the use of, encourage the use of mobile phones in bank transactions. Can you please take us through this story?
Okay, so the CBN has this 2020 agenda where it's aiming to target 80% as it is. They say that the numbers show that it's between 62 and 65%. And this USSD is one tool that they're very certain would increase and most definitely help this to be actualized. Well, for people who do not know what was happening, it became common knowledge when on the 21st of this month, a telco sent out a message to subscribers or whatever we are called that will be charged a certain amount per every 20 seconds that USSD is deployed. And that was when the communications minister possibly got wind of it allegedly and said it should be suspended.
Yes.
And a few days after that, if you check online, the cable has this memo that was leaked, and what it showed was that the bank CEOs actually agreed that yes, they would charge their customers this because they have been bearing a burden, some costs that they had to transfer to the end users, us, the users of these telcos, as the case may be. But what made it further interesting is that in that memo, they agreed that they were also going to split with the telcos, and quite a number of telcos were excited about it.
Of course.
But these guys had just been recently fined by the federal government and decided to be good and decided to send the text, like I mentioned, on the 21st of this month. And now everybody is fighting them as being the whistleblowers, when in reality, they're the ones that actually told you people we're trying to exonerate ourselves. So this is what it is. Now, what makes this story even more interesting is the fact that Bankers Committee is now claiming, oh, we didn't do this, blah, 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 blah. Well, I think fingers crossed. There is no way to deny the fact that technology has increased participation in banking, as the case may be. There's still a lot of work to be done, because if you go to certain African countries, mobile money is what has been turning and moving the economy around. That's not what we find. But the question is, how much longer would we not see that, especially as the bank charges continue to increase? You get a happy birthday message, you are charged for, you can as well keep your birthday message to yourself. So I, for one, see that what the Deputy Governor of Financial System Stability in CBN and the MD of
Ecobank.
EcoBank have said they know what's going on.
All right.
They have only just said that their hope is that technology will be deployed to increase and actualize the CBN's goal.
And it's our hope as end users as well.
Yep.
Yep. Then we are the ones who bear the brunt at the end of the day.
Very briefly, science students on Twitter says, when are you guys going to, okay, then we've actually done this. The Rooster says, this rice thing is becoming a cause of concern. Are we all about rice? Stop doing this.
Very funny.
wow.
Such a way to break that story. Thank you so much for that joke. All right, Mr. C. Court orders Lagos Assembly to suspend Ambode. So going back to the former, going back to the
Yes.
former governor of Lagos State, a Lagos High Court sitting in Ikeja has ordered the Lagos State House of Assembly to maintain status quo in the ongoing investigation of former Lagos State Governor Akinwumi Ambode. Please take us through the story.
Okay, so finally, a bit of sanity. Okay, for the benefit of our listeners. A few weeks back, the Lagos State House of Assembly initiated a probe into the purchase of 820 buses for the Lagos bus program by the immediate past governor of Lagos State. And part of the allegations were that the buses were purchased in contravention of the existing budget law and the lack of approval from the State House of Assembly. And they've been persistent in insisting that Mr. Ambode presents himself before them. And Mr. Ambode, on his part, has said everything was done in line with the budget. He's identified specific provisions of the 2018 budget that captured the approval and said that the approval they were talking about was illegal. Now, he had to rush to the courts to get a temporary injunction to restrain them from continuing with the exercise, which seems a bit like political witch hunting. Now, the good thing about the court process now is both parties will present the material to the court. The court, which is an impartial party, will look dispassionately at both sets of material and then come to an informed decision. But what is also instructive is Mr. Ambode sent his lawyer to the chambers, to the House of Assembly, and they refused him entry, saying that it was Mr. Ambode they want. I'm sorry. In a democracy, I'm sorry, in a democracy, in a serious country, that's why I say Nigeria is not a serious country.
We are a serious country, Mr. C.
In a serious country, in a serious country, you will not send away the legal representative of any individual, especially if you've asked that individual to come before you.
All right.
The lawyer acts as the agent for that party, and whatever he says binds his client.
Thank you, Mr. C.
Thank you. A quick message here on YouTube regarding the Supreme Court's judgment. It says from Loville, it said the Supreme Court will excuse the issue of perjury it raised against Buhari. It said that they will excuse that is highly appalling and shameful. This is the right time to say the judiciary has perished. To Lulokwe from Victoria Island. Thank you for your message.
All right. Our next story here, Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has sent an open letter to the U.S. President Donald Trump asking him to exercise his constitutional powers, in quote, pursuant to the Presidential Proclamation 7750 and 8697, to instruct the U.S. Secretary of State and U.S. Ambassador in Nigeria to temporarily ban Nigerian state governors and other senior public officials misusing the criminal justice system to jail journalists. So, in essential, they're saying that you should ban Nigerian governors who are jailing journalists and other bloggers.
Very quickly, there is no doubt that the freedom of the press is one of the cardinal, pillars for democracy, and without a doubt, we have seen that being slapped in our faces. Forget that we have Freedom of Information Act and law, whatever it is. We have seen in the last when almost 109 journalists have been attacked between 2010 2015. And at least 36 attacks on journalists were recorded between January and July just this year. So in 2018, for instance, 45 radio and television stations were sanctioned by the authorities on unfounded allegations of breaching some codes of conduct. It is preposterous, it is ludicrous, it is appalling that these things happen in 2019. And because I know many things that happen, I wonder why we allow these things to happen. Amaya posts it almost every morning on Twitter, so counting down the number of days that a certain journalist has been missing and nobody knows anything about it. So we know, we understand that we need to talk about these things.
Yes, we do.
But since they've gone to reach out to the president of the world, who I'm sure if he ever gets wind of this, I think I'll be wishing he was president of Nigeria, where he would have done every and anything. I kid you not, because in a country like America, where literally the press is as free as what freedom is, they still fight the fact that still stifled. They fight the fact that people are trying to kill stories. I like that we have to call out these officials because it's a clear case of abuse of power.
Yes.
Like Mr. C was saying earlier, sue me, defamation, and all of this. But Sarah has come out and has spoken about this. Let's see how this goes. Let's see where this leads. But yeah,
Thank you, Adenike.
Thank you.
If I seem to think that Serap should interrogate the role of the Nigerian Union of Journalists in all these detentions of
I
journalists.
absolutely agree.
All right, that's where we have to come to an end. But don't forget, at 9 o'clock, we take the conversation further. We take one of the stories from this morning, and you get the opportunity to analyze in detail. Please join us then. But before then, we have the Grapevine 981. A big thanks to our analysts, Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter, and Mr. C at Mr. C on Twitter. This is Smooth 98.1. Smooth Breakfast continues.
That's how the Lagos State House of Assembly will do mumbo jumbo without
Yes.
and because